72 hours. That's the mandatory quarantine period after each interaction with the gate. 72 hours locked in this observation room, with nothing but my thoughts and the blood pressure monitor strapped to my arm for company. They say it's a precaution, a way to ensure we don't bring anything unwanted back from the other side. But I think it's just as much about observation, about studying us, the subjects, as much as it is about studying the artifact itself. My name is Ben Carter. I'm a xenolinguist, or at least that's what my contract with the Department of Defense says. In reality, I'm a glorified codebreaker, an academic plucked from the dusty halls of university archives and thrust into the heart of something far stranger than I ever could have imagined. It's a long way from deciphering linear B tablets, and I do miss my old life at times. But there was an opportunity presented to me, and my curious nature got the best of me. Area 51. The name conjures images of flying saucers, little green men, and government conspiracies. The truth, as always, is both more mundane and more extraordinary. Yes, it's a highly classified military facility in the Nevada desert. Yes, it's where they test experimental aircraft and weapon systems, but it's also home to Sub-Level 7, a subterranean labyrinth of labs and containment chambers that houses anomalies, objects of unknown origin and function recovered from various locations around the globe. These are not your everyday meteorites or ancient tools. These are things that defy easy categorization, things that hint at a reality far more complex and unsettling than we like to admit. There is a black cylinder, about the height of a man, that is stored in a Faraday cage and emits an electromagnetic field that can cause electronic devices to fail. Another one is a collection of crystalline shards found in the Siberian permafrost that violate the second law of thermodynamics, maintaining a constant temperature regardless of the surrounding environment. The list goes on. But the gate is different. It's the centerpiece, the mystery that consumes most of our resources and attention. It's a circular artifact, about 20 feet in diameter, made of a smooth, dark metallic substance that absorbs more light than it reflects. Its surface is covered in geometric patterns, a language, if you will, that I've been tasked with deciphering. It was unearthed during a covert excavation in the Gobi Desert, buried deep beneath the sand in a chamber lined with materials that predated any known civilization. Carbon dating placed its age at over 200,000 years old, but the material itself, that's still a mystery. It doesn't match any known element on the periodic table. It's almost as if the thing's atomic structure is incomplete, like a half-finished puzzle waiting for a final piece. We've been running a series of tests, bombarding it with different frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, trying to elicit some kind of response. Dr. Adams, our lead physicist, and a man whose optimism is as boundless as his knowledge of quantum mechanics, has a hunch. He believes the patterns on the gate's surface are not just decorative, but represent a complex mathematical equation, a set of instructions. He theorized that it was some kind of lock or a tuning fork of sorts, and the patterns contained the sonic key to activating it. "Just a little tickle," he said on that fateful day, adjusting the frequency generator. "Let's see if we can make it sing." Colonel Jones, the military liaison assigned to Sub-Level 7, stood beside me, arms crossed, his usual skeptical expression firmly in place. He was a man of action, not contemplation, and his pragmatism often clashed with my more cautious approach. He had a square jaw, close-cropped grey hair, and eyes that assessed everyone as a potential threat or a useful tool. He saw the world in terms of black and white, allies and enemies, and he had little patience for the grey areas that I tended to inhabit. "You really think this thing is a door, Dr. Carter?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. "A portal to somewhere?" "The patterns suggest a level of complexity beyond any known technology, Colonel," I replied. "It's certainly worth exploring the possibility." Adams gave us a confident nod and initiated the sequence. A low, resonant tone built up from layered, disharmonic notes filled the chamber, vibrating not just in our ears but deep within our chests. The air pressure fluctuated, The lights flickered, not from a power surge, but from some interference the gate itself was generating. Then, the center of the artifact began to shimmer. Not a reflection, but a distortion. Like a heat haze on a summer day, only colder and more defined. The shimmering intensified, resolving itself into a perfect circle of swirling colors. We stared, speechless, as the circle solidified, becoming a window into somewhere else. It wasn't just light and color. There were shapes, movement. A landscape, alien yet strangely familiar, filled the space where solid metal had been moments before. Jones barked orders into his radio, calling for security teams and containment protocols. Scientists and soldiers rushed to document and analyze the phenomenon. The initial excitement, however, quickly gave way to caution. We sent in robotic probes, cautious, expecting anything from a vacuum to a toxic atmosphere. The initial images showed a landscape that was eerily familiar. Trees, mountains, a sky with 2 moons. The air was breathable, the gravity a little lighter than ours, but within tolerable limits. We called it Terra 2. The probes also showed a distinct absence of anything resembling our level of technology. No power lines, no roads, no cities, at least not in the immediate vicinity of the portal. For weeks we explored Terra 2 through the probes. We discovered strange flora and fauna unlike anything on Earth. Plants with broad, leathery leaves unfurled in complex geometric patterns, and insects with iridescent carapaces moved with unsettling speed through the undergrowth. The landscape was breathtaking, untouched by industrialization, revealing geological formations that hinted at a different tectonic history than our own. It was during one of these remote explorations that we encountered them. They emerged from the tree line, moving with a fluid grace. Humanoid, yes, but different. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, revealing a network of blue and red veins beneath the surface. Their movements were almost serpentine, and their eyes were large, black, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They lacked any discernible irises, giving them a disconcerting, insect-like appearance. They made no sound, at least not initially. It was clear that they were aware of the probe, of us. They approached it cautiously, their large, dark eyes studying it with an unnerving intensity. "They are intelligent, Colonel," I said, my voice filled with excitement and apprehension. "We need to establish communication." Jones, however, was more interested in their potential threat level. "Can they get through the gate, Doctor?" he asked, his eyes fixed on the monitor displaying the live feed. "Are they hostile?" "Unknown at this point," I replied. "But their behavior suggests curiosity, not aggression." Establishing communication became my primary focus. We set up a communication station near the gate, equipped with an array of microphones, cameras, and our prized possession, the Universal Translator, a device developed by my team over the past decade. It was designed to analyze and decipher any language based on the principles of universal grammar and pattern recognition. But the Bloom's communication, as we started calling them, was unlike anything we had encountered. It wasn't just vocalizations, it was a complex interplay of gestures, subtle shifts in skin coloration, and the release of pheromones, chemical signals that conveyed meaning in ways we were only beginning to understand. It would take months of dedicated effort to even begin to grasp their language. And that was where we stood now, months into the most significant discovery in human history, poised on the threshold of a new world, a new form of life. Now, sitting in quarantine, I have time to reflect on those early days, on the wonder and the trepidation that filled us as we took our first tentative steps towards understanding the Bloom. I think about their intense interest in our technology and wonder what it could mean for the future of humanity. What will they think when they see our cities, our machines? What will they want from us? The observation window in the quarantine room offers a limited view, a section of the hallway outside, a glimpse of the heavily reinforced door that leads to the gate. It's a reminder of where we are, of what we've found, and of the vast, unknown possibilities that lie ahead. And as I sit here, waiting for my next shift, my next opportunity to unravel the mysteries of the gate and its inhabitants, I can't shake the feeling that we've opened a door we may not be able to close. We are children playing with matches, and I can only hope that when they decide to cross over, we don't all get burned. The cultural exchange proposal, as the Bloom phrased it, arrived 6 months after first contact, delivered through a combination of painstakingly translated vocalizations and a series of projected images displayed on a large, flat surface they erected near the portal on their side. The images depicted humanoid figures, presumably representing us, interacting with their kind, exchanging knowledge and technology. It was a carefully crafted message, designed to appeal to our scientific curiosity and our desire for advancement. On our end, the initial skepticism had largely been replaced by a cautious optimism, at least among the higher-ups at the DoD and DARPA. The potential benefits of accessing the Bloom's biological knowledge were simply too great to ignore. They had mastered genetic manipulation to a degree that we were only beginning to dream of. For me, the concerns I'd harbored since our first encounter with the Bloom hadn't dissipated. They had intensified. The more I studied their language, the more I grasped the subtle details of their communication, the more I felt a growing sense of unease. There were still those inconsistencies, those subtle contradictions that the universal translator couldn't quite reconcile. And their focus on our technology, our extensions, as they called them, was still there, a constant undercurrent in all our interactions. "They see our tools as a part of us, Colonel," I explained to Jones during one of our meetings. "An extension of our physical selves. They don't seem to differentiate between organic and inorganic in the same way that we do." Jones, however, remained unfazed. "They're a primitive culture, Doctor. Of course, they're fascinated by our technology. That doesn't mean they're hostile." His pragmatism, while sometimes reassuring, often felt like willful ignorance. He was more interested in what the Bloom could offer us, particularly in terms of military applications, than in understanding their true nature. Despite my reservations, the decision was made. The exchange would proceed. A team of 10, including myself, Dr. Adams, 2 other biologists, Dr. Evans and Dr. Wallace, and a 5-man security detail led by Jones, would cross over to Terra 2. We would spend 2 weeks on their side, observing their culture, studying their technology, and hopefully gaining a deeper understanding of their intentions. The preparations were extensive. We underwent a battery of medical tests, were inoculated against every conceivable pathogen, and were fitted with specialized biosuits designed to protect us from any unknown biological hazards. The suits were bulky and uncomfortable, made of a flexible synthetic material that resisted tearing and had a self-sealing mechanism in case of a breach. They were equipped with internal air filters, hydration systems, and a variety of sensors to monitor our vital signs and the surrounding environment. We also carried bioscanners, handheld devices that could analyze the composition of organic matter, and sonic emitters modified from crowd control weapons, just in case. As a last-minute addition, Jones insisted we each carry a standard-issue military sidearm, a 9mm pistol. I argued against it, pointing out that it was unlikely to be effective against a civilization that had mastered biological manipulation, but he was insistent. The day of the crossing arrived. We gathered in the gate chamber, our reflections shimmering in the activated portal. The swirling, iridescent colors of the other side shifted and reconfigured constantly, like an image projected onto turbulent water. This time, I wasn't just an observer. This time, I was stepping through. "Remember," Jones said, his voice amplified by the comm system in our helmets, "we're guests here. Observe, document, but do not interfere. And stay alert." One by one, we stepped into the portal. The sensation was disorienting. a feeling of being squeezed and stretched, of every cell in my body being pulled in multiple directions at once. There was a brief flash of intense light, followed by a barrage of distorted noises, and then, just as suddenly, it was over. We materialized in a chamber that mirrored the one we had left behind in Area 51, but with one crucial difference. It was alive. The walls were made of organic material, a fleshy, pinkish-grey substance that seemed to breathe. Veins, thick as a man's arm, pulsed beneath the surface, carrying a viscous, luminescent fluid. It felt like stepping into a living organism. A delegation of Bloom awaited us. They were taller than they had appeared on the monitors, their movements even more fluid and sinuous in person. Their large black eyes, devoid of any discernible iris or pupil, fixed on us with an unnerving intensity. One of them, slightly larger than the others, with a series of light-emitting veins visible beneath its skin, stepped forward. After a moment, the universal translator strapped to my wrist began to vibrate, and a synthesized voice, slightly distorted and metallic, filled the chamber. "Welcome, guests," it said, the synthesized voice translating the Bloom's complex communication into English. The machine struggled to keep pace with the rapid shifts in color and pheromonal signals. "We honor you among us." Thus began our immersion into the world of the Bloom. They led us out of the arrival chamber and into their city, a network of colossal, tree-like structures that stretched as far as the eye could see. These were not natural trees, but bioengineered constructs, grown and shaped to serve as dwellings, transportation hubs, and who knew what else. The bark was a tough, resilient material, smooth in some places, rough and textured in others. The branches intertwined, forming a complex network of tunnels and pathways. We traveled through the city on the backs of large, six-legged creatures with iridescent carapaces that the Bloom controlled with a combination of vocal commands and subtle touches. The creatures moved with a surprising agility, their multiple legs navigating the uneven terrain with ease. The city was a riot of organic forms and breathing structures. There were no sharp angles, no straight lines, only curves and flowing shapes. It was beautiful, in a way, but also deeply unsettling. Our quarters were located within one of the larger tree-like structures. The interior was a labyrinth of interconnected chambers, the walls lined with a soft, yielding material that seemed to absorb sound. There were no windows, but the walls themselves emitted a soft, diffuse light, the intensity of which could be adjusted with a touch. The furniture was grown in place, organic extensions of the walls and floor, cushioned indentations for sitting, raised platforms for sleeping. Over the next few days, we began our exploration of the Bloom's culture and technology. We visited their laboratories, where they cultivated and manipulated various life forms, from bioluminescent plants to creatures that served as living tools. We observed their communication centers, where they used a combination of pheromones and bioacoustic signals to transmit information across vast distances. We even witnessed a demonstration of their healing process, where they used specialized organisms to repair damaged tissue and cure diseases. I spent most of my time trying to decipher their language, working with a designated Bloom linguist who seemed as curious about my thought processes as I was about theirs. The universal translator was helpful, but it was still struggling with the more abstract concepts, the nuances of meaning that were embedded in their pheromonal communication. I began to realize that their language was not just a means of conveying information, but a way of shaping reality itself. They used it to influence the growth of their biostructures, to control the behavior of their living tools, even, I suspected, to manipulate each other. As the days passed, my initial unease grew into a gnawing suspicion. I noticed things, subtle details that didn't quite add up. The way the Bloom seemed to anticipate our questions, almost as if they knew what we were going to ask before we even asked it. The way they steered us away from certain areas of their city, claiming they were unstable or undergoing regeneration. And the way their eyes, those large, black, unreadable eyes, always seemed to be watching us, studying us. One evening, I found Dr. Evans staring intently at one of the walls, his bioscanner held tightly in his hand. "What is it, Dr. Evans?" I asked. He looked up, startled. "I'm not sure, but I'm picking up some strange readings from these walls. It's like they're not just organic, there's something else. Something digital underneath." His words sent a chill down my spine. Digital. Could their biotechnology have a digital underpinning? Was that the key to their seemingly limitless control over organic matter? It was a terrifying thought. The following day, I discovered something even more disturbing. While exploring a seemingly abandoned section of the city with Dr. Adams, we came across a chamber filled with rows upon rows of large, transparent pods. Inside each pod, suspended in a viscous fluid, was a creature. Some were humanoid, others were unlike anything I had ever seen, grotesque amalgams of different species. They were all alive, their bodies twitching spasmodically, their eyes, where they had eyes, staring out blankly. It looked like some kind of biological experimentation chamber, but on a scale that dwarfed anything we had ever attempted. "What are they doing with these things?" Dr. Adams whispered, his voice filled with horror. As I looked at those poor, twisted creatures, I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the Blooms' intentions were far from benevolent. And I had a feeling that our time here was quickly running out. Any lingering doubts I had about the Blooms' true intentions vanished, replaced by a hard certainty. We were in grave danger. We had to get out, and we had to get out now. Convincing the others, however, was not easy. Jones was initially skeptical. "We don't know what those things are, Doctor," he argued, his voice tight with frustration. "They could be anything. Failed experiments, medical treatments, maybe even some kind of food source." "They're sentient beings, Colonel," I countered. "Or they were once. Look at the way they're restrained, the way they're being altered. This isn't some kind of hospital. It's a laboratory. And we're next on the menu." It was Dr. Evans, the biologist who had detected the strange readings in the walls, who finally tipped the scales. He had continued his surreptitious scans, focusing on the areas the Blooms seemed most eager to keep us away from. And he had found something that confirmed my worst fears. "There's a pattern, a repeating sequence in the biodigital emissions," he explained, his voice trembling slightly. "It's a form of code, a set of instructions, and it's not just in the walls, it's everywhere." He paused, taking a deep breath. I think they're using it to control them, to reprogram them. And I think they're planning to do the same to us." That was enough for even Jones. The potential for biological assimilation, for having our very minds and bodies rewritten by the Blooms' technology, was a threat he couldn't ignore. We decided to act quickly, before the Bloom could realize that we were onto them. Our plan was simple, perhaps even naive in its desperation: get back to the gate and shut it down from this side. Escape, however, was far from simple. The city was a labyrinthine network of organic tunnels and chambers, and the Bloom were always watching. We moved under the cover of their night cycle, when the bioluminescent light that illuminated the city dimmed to a faint glow. We stuck to the less traveled pathways, the ones that seemed to be used for maintenance or waste disposal, hoping to avoid detection. The air in these tunnels was thick with the smell of decay, of organic matter breaking down and being recycled. As we moved deeper into the city, the environment became increasingly bizarre. We encountered strange, hybrid creatures, things that looked like they had been cobbled together from different species, patrolling the tunnels. They were clearly bioengineered guards, their bodies augmented with organic weaponry, razor-sharp claws, hardened carapaces, and limbs that ended in venom-dripping sacs. We engaged in our first real confrontation near a large, open chamber that seemed to serve as a central hub for the city's organic network. A group of Bloom blocked our path. They were larger and more heavily armored than the ones we had encountered before. their skin covered in bony plates, their limbs elongated and tipped with wickedly sharp organic blades. "Hold your fire," Jones ordered, his hand hovering near his pistol. "Let's see if we can get past them without a fight." I stepped forward, raising my hands in a gesture I hoped would be interpreted as peaceful in their culture. The universal translator, strapped to my wrist, vibrated intensely, its small screen displaying a series of rapidly changing symbols and color gradients. I focused on the device, attempting to mimic the Bloom's communication patterns as best as I could. I concentrated, trying to visualize the concepts of no harm and desire to leave, while simultaneously mimicking the corresponding skin color shifts I had observed in previous interactions. It was like trying to pat your head and rub your stomach while reciting a complex mathematical formula. The translator's screen flashed, indicating it was attempting to synthesize my clumsy attempt into a coherent message. A series of clicks, whistles, and low-frequency hums, accompanied by a faint, musky odor, emanated from the device. It was a crude approximation of the Bloom's language. On the screen, I could see the English translation of what the translator hoped it was conveying. "We mean no harm. We wish to leave." Whether the message was actually understood, or if it was even remotely close to accurate, remained to be seen. The Bloom remained motionless, their black, unblinking eyes fixed on us. Then, one of them, the largest of the group, let out a series of clicks and whistles. The translator struggled, then spat out a single, chilling word. "Integrate." They attacked. The sonic emitters, our only real defense against their organic technology, proved surprisingly effective. The high-frequency sound waves disrupted the Bloom's physiology, causing them to stagger and convulse. Their motions became irregular, their skin rippling with uncontrolled spasms. But there were too many of them, and they were too strong. One of them rushed at me, its organic blade slicing through the air. I ducked, feeling the wind of its passage on my cheek. Dr. Evans, standing beside me, fired his sonic emitter, catching the creature full in the chest. It shrieked, a high-pitched, piercing sound that echoed through the chamber, and collapsed, its body twitching violently. But the others kept coming. Jones and his security team opened fire with their pistols, the gunshots echoing in the organic environment. The bullets, while not entirely ineffective, seemed to do little more than enrage the Bloom. They were designed to kill humans, not creatures with such drastically different biology. One of the security detail, a young private named Collins, was caught by a Bloom's whip-like appendage and dragged to the ground. His screams were cut short as the creature's organic blade sliced through his biosuit and into his flesh. It was chaos. We were outnumbered, outmatched, and quickly running out of options. The Bloom were relentless, their organic blades slicing through the air, their bodies seemingly impervious to our bullets. Collins was already down, and Dr. Wallace was nowhere to be seen. We were pinned down in the large open chamber, the entrance to the network of tunnels blocked by the advancing Bloom guards. We switched our emitters to the highest setting, focusing the sonic waves into tight beams. It was Dr. Evans who made the first breakthrough. He aimed his emitter at the knee joint of one of the onrushing Bloom. The creature stumbled, its leg buckling beneath it. The high-frequency sound waves, while not lethal, were clearly disrupting the creature's neuromuscular control, causing its limbs to seize and malfunction. The creature collapsed on the floor, unable for the time being to stand up and fight. We followed his lead, concentrating our fire on the Bloom's joints and other vulnerable points. It was a desperate fight, but the sonic emitters used strategically began to give us an edge. We were able to disable several of the guards, creating an opening in their formation. We scrambled through the opening, pushing past the disabled Bloom and into the network of tunnels beyond. We didn't know where we were going, but we knew we had to keep moving. We could hear the sounds of the Bloom recovering behind us, their enraged cries echoing through the tunnels, along with a new, more rhythmic thumping that shook the walls. We were in a maze, and our pursuers knew the layout far better than we did. We relied on our bioscanners to guide us, hoping to find a path that led towards the gate while avoiding the pursuing bloom. The scanners, however, were also picking up something else. Something large and fast, moving through the walls of the city. It was Dr. Evans who recognized the signature first. "It's the same energy pattern we detected earlier, in the walls," he said, his voice tight with fear. "Only now it is much more concentrated. It is moving. Fast." We found Dr. Wallace dead in a narrow corridor, his biosuit torn open, his body partially absorbed by the organic wall. It was a gruesome sight, a clear display of the bloom's terrifying power, and a vision of what awaited us if that thing caught us. Finally, we reached the chamber that housed the gate. The gate itself flared with energy, the swirling colors more intense, more chaotic than before. A group of bloom, including the one with the bioluminescent markings that had greeted us upon our arrival, stood guard before the portal. They were different from the others we had encountered, more refined, more in control. They seemed to be the custodians of the gate, the controllers of the portal. The marked bloom was staring intently at a particular spot on the wall, its hand pressed against the surface. It was as if it was communicating with the city itself. "You cannot leave," the marked bloom communicated, the universal translator struggling to keep pace. "You will be integrated." "We're shutting it down," Jones said, his voice grim. He raised his pistol, aiming at the marked bloom, but hesitated. He knew, as we all did, that the pistol was useless against the bloom's advanced biology. The marked bloom glanced at him, not with aggression or fear, but rather an expression of pity. It made no attempt to defend itself. The wall behind the marked bloom began to bulge outwards. A massive, segmented limb, thicker than a man's torso, burst through the organic material, sending chunks of flesh flying across the chamber. The limb, covered in chitinous plates and tipped with a wickedly sharp curved claw, lashed out with blinding speed. It smashed into the marked bloom, impaling it through the chest and lifting it off the ground. The other bloom recoiled in horror, their carefully maintained composure shattered. The creature that emerged from the wall was unlike anything we had seen before. It was a monstrous biomechanical abomination, a fusion of organic and inorganic matter. It was the source of the energy signature we had detected earlier, a living weapon created by the city itself. And it was loose, a weapon so powerful, so uncontrollable, that it was attacking its own creators. The creature, having dispatched the marked bloom, turned its attention to us. It moved with terrifying speed, its multiple limbs tearing through the remaining bloom guards as if they were made of paper. We ran towards the portal, the monstrous creature hot on our heels. On the other side of the portal, in Area 51, we could see Dr. Adams frantically working at the controls, trying to shut down the gate from his end. In a final, desperate act, Colonel Jones turned to face the creature, raising his pistol. "Get to the gate," he commanded. "I'll hold it off." It was a suicide mission, and he knew it. The pistol was useless, but he bought us the precious seconds we needed, drawing the creature's attention away from us. Dr. Evans and I scrambled towards the collapsing portal, the ground shaking beneath our feet, the air filled with the creature's enraged shrieks and Jones's final, desperate cry. We dove through the shrinking aperture just as the portal winked out of existence, collapsing in on itself with a silent implosion that left only a smooth, unbroken expanse of organic wall where the gate had once stood. We were back in Area 51, in the concrete chamber of Sublevel 7. We were alive, but we were not unscathed. We had lost Collins, Wallace, and Jones. And we had seen things, done things that would haunt us for the rest of our lives. The gate was closed for now, but the threat remained. We knew that the bloom were still out there, on their parallel Earth, and we could only guess at what the city was doing to them, now that they had failed. We knew that they desired our technology, that they sought to integrate us into their collective, and we knew that they would not give up easily. They were patient, resourceful, and they had mastered a form of technology that we were only beginning to comprehend. They were a force unlike any we had ever encountered. A force that blurred the lines between life and technology, between individual and collective. The city had even turned against them to stop us. My job now, as one of the few who had seen the truth and lived to tell the tale, was to prepare, to study the data we had gathered, to try to understand the Bloom's technology, their motivations, their weaknesses, to find a way to defend ourselves against a threat that could, quite literally, rewrite our reality. The knowledge that I carry isolates me from others who did not experience those horrors firsthand. They cannot hope to understand the Bloom like I do. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. The encounter with the Bloom had changed us, changed humanity, forever. We had glimpsed the terrifying potential of a universe far stranger and far more dangerous than we had ever imagined. And we had learned, at a terrible cost, that some doors once opened can never truly be closed. The threshold had been crossed and there was no going back.